I was elbow-deep in grease when I heard the tires screech outside my property line. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped out of the garage just in time to see a flatbed tow truck creeping toward my tractor, my father's old green Massey Ferguson, that I'd been restoring over the past few months. And standing right beside it, arms crossed tight like she was holding back the entire weight of suburbia on her shoulders, was none other than Christine Halbrook, president of the Pine Hills Homeowners Association and self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac. "Levi Johnson," she called out like a parking officer writing a ticket. "That tractor is in violation of our community aesthetic code. It's unsightly, rusting, and you've had it parked in the same spot for over 72 hours. "It's on my driveway," I said, brushing off my jeans. "And that code applies to non-operational vehicles on public streets. My driveway is private property." Christine's nose wrinkled like she'd smelled something offensive. "We had a vote. The board decided that visible farming equipment doesn't reflect the neighborhood's values." "What values?" "You mean the ones that let you fine my neighbor $200 for planting sunflowers too close to the mailbox?" She ignored that. "The tow truck is already here. Your non-compliance has consequences." I raised an eyebrow. "You called a tow truck to take my tractor?" She smiled like she thought she'd won something. "Correct. And if you resist, that's further grounds for legal escalation." I turned to the driver, a lanky guy in his 30s, who looked a little too uncomfortable for someone doing a routine pickup. "Who sent you?" He shuffled in place. "Dispatch said Pine Hills HOA. They paid upfront. I was just told to pick up a green tractor." I nodded slowly. "You work for Central County Towing, right?" "That's right," Christine huffed. "Are we done here? Remove it." I held up a hand. "Hold on. My cousin owns Central County Towing. So does my uncle. It's a family business. I grew up in that yard. You think I wouldn't recognize our own trucks?" Christine blinked. I pointed at the driver. "Call your dispatcher. Ask who authorized the tow." He hesitated, then pulled out his radio. Dispatch, I've got a Levi Johnson here, says he's family with the owners." There was a pause. Then the static crackled. "Pull out now. Do not touch that tractor. That's Levi J. from Maple Hollow. Get out of there now." Christine's face went sheet white. I walked up to her. "You tried to tow my tractor with my family's company. You really thought no one would notice?" She crossed her arms again but didn't say a word. "This isn't over, Christine," I said. "You just crossed a line." The next morning, I was halfway through replacing the timing belt on the Massey when my phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed, "Uncle Terry." I set my wrench down and answered. "She really tried to run that order through under a fake name," he said without a greeting. "Some lady named Carla Hensley, no ID, no verification, paid cash. I've got the invoice and security footage. You want it?" "Absolutely," I said, already grabbing my notebook. "Send everything over. I've got something in mind," he laughed. "You're going to make this fun, aren't you?" "Not fun. Just fair." By noon, I had the footage, the falsified work order, and a copy of the illegitimate HOA memo she'd handed the dispatcher, complete with a forged signature from someone named Board Legal Counsel, which, as far as I could tell, didn't exist. I added it to a growing file I'd started keeping in a weatherproof folder in my garage office. My dad always said, "Don't get mad, get receipts." That evening, I walked 2 doors down to see Mr. Alvarez, a retired county records clerk who'd lived in Pine Hills since the subdivision was dirt and survey flags. He opened the door still wearing his reading glasses and motioned me in. "She's trying to expand her reach," he said, pulling up a set of HOA zoning proposals on his laptop. At last month's meeting, she introduced a motion to redefine private driveways as shared aesthetic spaces. It's vague, deliberately so, but it was tabled when I asked about property rights. "Can I get a copy?" He clicked a few keys and printed the draft. "She's banking on people not showing up to the next vote. That's how she passes stuff: low attendance, loaded proxies." I took the printout and nodded. Time to change that. The next morning, I started knocking on doors, not just on my street but across the entire neighborhood. I brought printed bullet points, copies of the fake tow order, and a list of recent overreaches like the time she fined the Martins for having a Halloween display she said encouraged vandalism. Most listened. Some were skeptical. A few were angry, especially when I explained how Christine was trying to redefine driveways without anyone noticing. But by late afternoon, I had over 40 signatures on a petition demanding a full review of recent board actions and a call for a special meeting. By sunset, I walked over to Darlene's place. She used to chair the HOA before Christine Strong armed her out with a procedural technicality 2 years back. She was watering her roses when I arrived. "She'll try to block this," Darlene said, flipping through the petition. "But if you file it with the city clerk and notify the county housing liaison, she's got no legal ground to stand on, especially with forged documents involved." "I was hoping you'd say that," I replied. "I already called the liaison. She's meeting me tomorrow." Darlene chuckled. "You're not just fixing tractors anymore, huh? That ship sailed yesterday." The next day, I drove downtown and met with Julia Cormack, the county housing liaison. She was sharp-eyed, didn't waste time, and took one look at the forged tow order before pulling out her phone. "This isn't just an HOA issue," she said. "This crosses into misuse of authority and attempted property theft. I'm escalating it to the city attorney's office. You'll want to file a formal complaint. I'll fast-track the review." By that Friday, things started shifting. Word spread fast. Residents who had kept quiet before started speaking up. One shared how Christine had threatened to report his son's car as abandoned because of a faded bumper sticker. Another had a letter stating their garden shed was non-compliant despite being screened from view and grandfathered in under a previous board. The tipping point came when Mrs. Riley, who'd lived in Pine Hills longer than anyone and rarely got involved, stood up at the next open forum and read a letter aloud. In it, she described how Christine had shown up at her door with a clipboard, implying that if she didn't vote with the board on certain measures, her property tax assessment might come under scrutiny. Gasps went around the room. Christine, seated at the head of the board table, tried to laugh it off. "I never said anything like that," she said. Perhaps Mrs. Riley misunderstood, but Mrs. Riley wasn't having it. She held up her ring finger where a tiny microphone was hidden in the setting of her antique engagement ring. "I record all my conversations now," she said. "Just in case." Christine's face locked into something brittle. That's when Julia Cormack entered the room, flanked by a uniformed officer and a city attorney named Randall Price. Christine's expression didn't change, but her fingers clenched the table's edge. Randall stepped up. "We're here under authority of the County Housing Board. A formal investigation has been opened into fraudulent documentation, abuse of power, and falsified legal representation." Christine stood up. "This is a neighborhood association matter. It became a criminal matter the moment you submitted forged documents to contract services for private property removal," Randall said. "You are hereby suspended from board duties pending investigation. You'll be contacted directly by the city's compliance division." The officer handed her a notice. Christine snatched it, her jaw working like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. As she stepped away from the table, residents began whispering. A few clapped. Someone muttered, "About time." I kept quiet. I wasn't in it for the applause. That night, a few of the neighbors came by with beers and folding chairs. We sat in my driveway, the Massey parked right where it belonged, gleaming under the porch light. "You think she'll be back?" one of them asked. "If she is," I said, taking a sip, "she'll find out the neighborhood's changed." The following Monday brought a strange hush over Pine Hills. For the first time in months, nobody was walking around with a clipboard, no passive-aggressive notes taped to mailboxes. No unsolicited reminders about decorative mulch colors. Just the dry rustle of sycamore leaves across the sidewalk and the low hum of lawnmowers. I pulled the tarp off my welding rig and wheeled it out to the gravel pad beside the garage. The Massey's frame still needed a few solid welds before I could get the new loader arm mounted. As I slid my goggles into place, a familiar voice called out from the street. "Levi, got a minute?" It was Carla Nguyen, who lived 4 houses down. She ran a custom cabinetry business out of her garage and usually kept to herself. Her eyes were sharp, but today they carried something else: urgency. They just found 3 shredded HOA documents buried in the green bin behind the clubhouse, she said. Timmy and I were walking the dog and saw a maintenance guy dumping a bunch of files. I grabbed what I could before he noticed. She handed me a sealed plastic bag. Inside were torn pages, some still legible. I made out phrases like unauthorized disbursement, cash withdrawal approval bypassed, and most concerning of all, a line that read, "Approved $7,800 transfer to CH under discretionary beautification." Carla crossed her arms. "I don't think we're just dealing with power trips anymore," I nodded. $7,800 isn't much money. "This was dated 2 weeks before that stunt with your tractor," she added. "Makes you wonder how many discretionary projects Christine's been paying herself for." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I reached for my phone and dialed Randall Price, the city attorney who'd been assigned to the investigation. He picked up on the second ring. "You're going to want to see something," I said. An hour later, I was sitting across from Randall at a table in the Pine Hills Community Center. Carla sat beside me, her phone open to a folder of photos she'd taken of the bin before grabbing the documents. Randall examined the evidence 1 torn page at a time. "You know what discretionary beautification usually means?" he asked. "Seasonal flowers, new benches, maybe a repainted sign, not cash transfers to the board president." "What happens now?" Carla asked. "I'm requesting a court order for the HOA's financial records," Randall said. "We'll go back 5 years. If I find what I think I'm going to find, it won't just be a city issue. We'll bring in the state auditor." Carla leaned back, eyebrows raised. "That bad?" Randall tapped a page. "If this is accurate, she's been embezzling, and if she used forged invoices, she did," I interrupted. "I've got the fake tow order. My uncle traced the authorization signature. It's not tied to any licensed contractor." Randall nodded. "Then we proceed." By Wednesday, subpoenas were issued. Christine's name wasn't just on the documents, it was all over them. Multiple cash withdrawals, several logged under fake project names like clubhouse window repair and emergency landscaping. The kicker? None of those projects ever happened. The clubhouse windows hadn't been touched in years. The landscaping had been done by volunteers. Randall brought in a forensic accountant. It took less than 2 days to uncover a pattern. Christine had been siphoning HOA dues into a personal account under a shell business named Pine Progress Properties, LLC. Registered to a P.O. box in the next county. She'd been laundering HOA funds through it under the guise of consulting fees. I was back in my garage when the call came in. "This is Detective Meeks from the County Financial Crimes Division. You're listed as a witness in an active fraud investigation involving one Christine Halbrook. I'd like to schedule a statement." They came out the next morning, 2 unmarked cars. Christine was arrested outside the nail salon near the grocery center. She tried to argue, of course, waving her purse and insisting she was on the board and had immunity. 2 officers calmly explained that a neighborhood board didn't exempt her from state fraud statutes. The news spread faster than wildfire in a dry canyon. By Friday, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't planning to attend, but then I got a visit unexpected but not unwelcome. It was Benji, the youngest board member, maybe 30, ex-military. He'd only joined the board a few months ago, mostly to keep the playgrounds in shape for his 2 kids. "She told us the legal fund was dry," he said, standing on my front walk. "Said we couldn't afford to fight back when residents challenged her. I believed her." We all did. I stepped outside, arms crossed. "She lied to everyone, don't blame yourself." "I voted to approve 2 of those transfers," he said, voice low. "Didn't ask for receipts, just trusted her, that's on me." There was a beat of silence. Well, I finally said, you can keep feeling guilty, or you can help fix it. He nodded. Meetings at 6, you coming? I looked back at the tractor. The loader arm would wait. That meeting turned into something nobody expected. The room was packed, not just board members and committee heads. Residents, business owners, retirees, even teenagers who usually spent their evenings glued to their phones. Everyone was there. Benji stood up first. We were misled. We approved things we didn't understand, and many of us didn't ask questions we should have. That ends now. There was a pause, then a hand went up in the back. It was Darlene. I nominate Levi Johnson to serve as interim compliance chair, she said. I blinked. I never asked for that's exactly why it should be you, she said. You didn't want power. You wanted accountability. The room murmured in agreement. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't have a speech. I didn't even have a clean shirt. But I stood up anyway. I'm not here to play politics, I said. I just want this place to be what it was supposed to be when we all moved in. A neighborhood, not a kingdom. People clapped, some even stood. I saw Carla in the back, arms folded, nodding. After the meeting, Benji approached me again. You know she had plans to expand the HOA, he said quietly. Not just redefine driveways, she wanted to include the undeveloped plots north of the drainage basin. Said it was for growth initiatives. But she'd already signed preliminary purchase agreements with HOA funds. That caught me off guard. She was trying to buy land. She used the shell company. Masked it like it was an outside vendor. If she hadn't been caught, she would have owned it personally by next year. I stared at the floor for a second. And we'd all be paying her rent, Benji nodded. Exactly. I want every record from the last 5 years scanned and posted online, I said. Every vote, every transfer, every meeting transcript. If we're going to clean this up, we start with daylight. Already in motion, he said. We've got a volunteer task force forming. That night, I walked back home in the cool dark, streetlights humming above the sidewalk. The Massey sat right where it belonged, loader arm finally mounted, glinting in the moonlight. A small thing, maybe, but it was mine. And now it wasn't just about a tractor. It was about what happens when regular people stop letting someone else make the rules unchecked. When neighbors stop being polite and start demanding answers. When the clipboard tyrants get reminded that the people they try to control have teeth, and sometimes tractors. The following week began with something unexpected. 2 plain sedans rolled into the neighborhood just after sunrise and parked across from the HOA clubhouse. A woman in a navy pantsuit stepped out of the first one, carrying a thick manila folder. She walked with the kind of posture that meant she wasn't here to ask nicely. Someone on the board had called in the state's Office of Neighborhood Compliance. Apparently, once Randall Price filed the audit request, it triggered a review at the state level. Christine's little empire of paperwork and fake companies had caught more than just the city's attention. I was elbow-deep in my truck's suspension when I got the knock on my garage door. Benji stood there holding 2 coffees and a folder of his own, face drawn with something between frustration and quiet resolve. She didn't just try to buy land, he said, handing me the cup. Turns out she already did through that fake LLC, but it gets worse. She used HOA dues as a down payment on a property she then leased back to the HOA at triple market rate. That's why the new storage shed project cost over $20,000. I stared at him. She leased it to herself. She listed it under a holding company owned by her cousin, but the trail's clear. The lease agreement is signed by her twice, once as board president, once as property manager. And the worst part, she backdated the paperwork to make it look like it was approved last year. I opened the folder. There were copies of checks, transfer ledgers, and a scan lease agreement with both signatures. It felt like peeling back a wall and finding rot in every beam. Benji set his coffee down. The state investigators want to meet with you. They're reviewing the HOA's insurance claims now. There's suspicion she filed a false one last spring after that windstorm. That caught me. The one that barely knocked over a trash can. She submitted a damage claim for structural repairs to the clubhouse roof. $34,000, but the contractor listed on the invoice doesn't exist. No license, no tax ID, nothing. I wiped my hands on a shop rag. When do they want to meet? Now. I followed him down to the clubhouse where the investigator, who introduced herself as Assistant Compliance Director Lacey Ferris, had already set up shop in the boardroom. She had a laptop open, a portable scanner, and a stack of reports taller than a toaster. After introductions, she got straight to the point. "We've confirmed fraudulent financial activity that spans at least 4 years," she said. "We've identified shell entities, falsified invoices, and at least 3 separate instances where association funds were misappropriated for personal gain. What we need now is corroboration from the residents on how these decisions were presented to them. If you can show that the board's votes were manipulated or misrepresented, it adds another charge: conspiracy to defraud." I didn't need time to think. I pulled out the folder I'd been building for the last week, the one with the tow order, the memo about redefining driveways, and the petition signed by over 50 residents. I handed it over. Christine used intimidation, false notices, and procedural tricks to silence dissent, I said. She rigged quorum counts, collected proxy votes from residents who never gave consent, and buried spending approvals under vague language. This wasn't mismanagement, it was calculated. Lacey nodded. That's what I needed to hear. We're already prepping the case for the district attorney. Before I left, she handed me a business card with a seal embossed in gold. We'll be back next week with a full compliance team. In the meantime, keep everything documented. That weekend, the neighborhood buzzed with a strange new energy. Not fear, not tension, something closer to relief. People were finally talking openly and without worry that Christine or one of her proxies would come knocking with another citation. I was setting up a new tool cabinet in the garage when Mr. Alvarez walked over with a thumb drive. "I scanned every HOA meeting minute from the last 7 years," he said. "Christine didn't know I kept my own copies, hard copies too, figured this might help." I plugged it into my laptop and started reading. It helped more than he knew. There were discrepancies everywhere. Meetings that never happened. Decisions made with no recorded vote. One entry simply read, "Budget adjustment approved, see attached," with no attachment. But the most damning entry was from 18 months ago. It read, "Emergency board vote held via email. Approval of $12,500 landscaping contract with Pine Progress Properties LLC. No signatures, no timestamps, just a note in Christine's handwriting. That was the missing link. I forwarded the entry to Lacey, who responded within an hour. "Got it." That seals the conspiracy charge. By Tuesday morning, Christine had officially been indicted on 6 counts of fraud, 2 counts of identity falsification, and 1 count of criminal conspiracy to defraud a homeowners association. The state attorney general's office filed the charges publicly, and the local news crews were parked outside her house before lunchtime. She didn't answer the door. The new interim board, now led by Darlene and Benji, moved quickly. They froze all outgoing funds, hired an independent accounting firm, and issued a full financial transparency mandate. Every resident got a letter explaining what had happened, what was being done to fix it, and how future board actions would be recorded and posted for public review. But the real closure came Thursday night. The community held an open forum in the clubhouse. Every chair was filled. People stood along the back wall and spilled out onto the front lawn. There was no gavel, no formal agenda, just neighbors finally being heard. Benji opened the floor. "Tonight isn't about blame, it's about rebuilding trust." One by one, people spoke. Carla, who'd found the shredded documents. Mr. Alvarez, who'd archived the minutes. Even Mrs. Riley, who reminded everyone that protecting your home sometimes means standing up to the people meant to protect it. Then someone nudged me forward. I hadn't planned to speak, but I took the mic and stood in front of the room anyway. "I didn't get into this because I wanted to," I said. "It started with a tractor." But what I found was a group of people being controlled by one person who thought she could bend the rules to fit her ego, and she almost got away with it because we let her. We trusted that someone else would catch it. Someone else would stop it. But we're not someone else, we're this neighborhood, and it's our job to protect it. The room was quiet, not tense, just full of people listening. I handed the mic back and stepped down. Carla gave me a pat on the shoulder as I passed. Even Darlene looked like she might tear up, though she'd never admit it. Afterwards, people lingered. Not out of obligation, but because for the first time in years this felt like a community again. Someone brought out lemonade. A couple kids ran around the grass out front. Someone even turned on an old portable speaker and played music low enough that nobody minded. I stood outside the clubhouse with Benji, watching the porch lights flicker on across the street. "You think it's over?" he asked. "Not yet," I replied. "But it's heading that way." "I heard the state might dissolve the HOA entirely," he said. "If they find enough misuse of funds, they could revoke the charter." I nodded. "Let them. We'll build something better, something honest." He didn't respond right away. Just looked out at the people laughing, talking, being neighbors again. "Never thought I'd say this," he said, "but I'm glad she came after your tractor." I chuckled. "So's my uncle." He said tow business hasn't been this good in years. Everybody suddenly wants to double-check who's authorized to remove what. As the night wound down, I walked home under the streetlights. The Massey sat parked in the same spot it always had. Not once had it moved during all of this. But somehow it had become the line in the sand. The thing that started it all. Some people plant flags, some raise banners. Me, I just parked a tractor and refused to back it up.